Hello everyone, Shaoling here, and this is Tyranny, Obsidian's next isometric classic RPG. For those of you who have played Pillars of Eternity, this will be quite a familiar experience, and for those of you who haven't, I think if you're interested in getting into this kind of genre of game, Tyranny might be a good one. It's relatively easy to get into, and it's not an overly long game. I haven't played an isometric RPG like this for a really long time, probably Icewind Dale or Baldur's Gate or something like that. I do own Pillars of Eternity, but I haven't gotten around to playing it yet. So I'll say that it took me a little while to get into the game. It was a little bit of a slow start, but once I'd learned the systems and gotten into the story, I really had a great time with this particular experience. I will say though that there are some criticisms I have about the game, which I will talk about in a little bit. Right off the bat, I do want to say though, if you don't like reading, then maybe this game isn't going to be for you, since there is a ton of reading in this particular game with regard to lore and dialogue choices and things like that. So in Tyranny, you play a Fatebinder, a representative of an evil overlord by the name of Kairos. Yes, you heard me correctly, you play a henchman of an evil overlord, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be evil. You can make choices in the game which are good. You're basically sent into the last remnant of land that has not yet been conquered by the Overseer to help two armies, the Dishonored and the Scarlet Chorus. Both have different leadership and both have different philosophies with regard to war. So you're going to have to kind of deal with disputes between them and sort of just in general help them secure this last conquest. The area that you're going to is called the Tiers, and you're also going to issue an edict for Kairos, which is kind of a spell, I suppose. It's a spell that's cast over an entire area, and it lasts until the conditions of the spell are met. So in the case of the edict that's cast at the beginning of the game, it's basically sealed everyone into the Tiers, so no one can get out. That's including you and the two armies, and will basically kill everyone in the area unless, of course, you capture Vendrian's Well. So this first part of the game is time-based. You have, I believe it's 7 days in order to capture this particular objective. But once you've done that, the rest of the game is without any kinds of time limit. So as with any RPG, you'll get to create a character, choose some backstory, choose your primary and secondary weapon specializations. There aren't any classes in Tyranny. It's kind of like Skyrim, where depending on what skills you use, those are the skills that are going to increase. And when you've increased enough of your skills across your character, you'll level up. And the other thing is, after you've gone through your character creation, you'll get to choose whether or not you want to do the conquest. Now the conquest spans across 3 years of Kairos' invasion before you actually start the game. Each year will give you a number of situations in which you have to make a number of different choices. And these choices are, for the most part, going to affect your reputation with one of the two armies. And it's also going to affect the game world when you start, as well as offering you new dialogue choices with various characters in the game. So depending on the choices you make at the beginning, you could have a different experience in your playthrough, which I think is nice. The devs have said that they wanted Tyranny to be a shorter experience than Pillars, but more approachable and also more replayable. So once you've done all that, you begin your journey into Tyranny. Tyranny is represented in an isometric view, much like Pillars of Eternity, or if you've played games like Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale, you'll be quite at home here. Each zone is its own instance, so you're free to walk around the zone, talk to NPCs, search around for hidden objects, or even engage in different encounters. Once you exit the zone, there's a loading screen which takes you into the next zone. Dialogue wise, there is a ton of dialogue, and I'm not kidding, there's a massive amount of choice in the game with regard to your dialogue trees and things like that, which affect your reputation with one of the game's various factions, others with your companions, and others are going to affect your reputation with key characters in the game, and others just basically filling in some backstory. So reputation is a big part of Tyranny. Each of the factions in the game has favor and wrath, and each of these has a meter. And as you reach certain points in the meter, you'll gain a variety of passive bonuses to your group, depending on the faction and of course depending on whether it's favor or wrath. There is a very similar system with your companions called loyalty and fear, and this is governed by certain choices you make in dialogue as to what you get points in one or the other. And getting to a certain level in the loyalty or fear is going to unlock certain abilities or companion combos that you can use, which I'll talk about when we get onto the combat itself. It is possible to have both high loyalty and fear in some cases, So you can get both. And on top of that, the reputation is going to also determine how the factions react to you and what kind of information they're willing to share to you and share with you at least, and that kind of thing. There are a large amount of factions in the game, more than I would have thought. Some of them are minor factions, so you're not going to spend too much time dealing with them, but there are a few major factions in the game, which for sure is going to affect your gameplay experience depending on what your reputation with them is. With a game like Tyranny, because it's so narrative driven, it's difficult to not show spoilers when talking about the game. I'm going to try not to show too much of the story stuff. I'm going to try and keep it to the beginning section of the game or footage that has already been shown for you guys. So as you progress through the game, you are going to get more companions that you can choose to be in your party. You can have 4 at any one time, your party size. So that's 3 companions and you. Each of these companions has 2 or 3 skill trees that you can put points into depending on what kind of role you want them to play. You can mix and match or you can specialize. It's entirely up to you. But I do want to say that all of these skill trees are unique to each of the companions. So for example, with Verse, who is the first companion you come across, she can specialize in dual wielding or a ranged weapon. For the purpose of my playthrough, I focused her as a ranged character since my character focused in dual wielding. So you can mix and match and you can sort of build up your party as you see fit. Every character has inventory and gear, and your character also has a stash which is accessible from your inventory screen from anywhere in the world, which is absolutely wonderful. You don't have to go somewhere. You'll never get over encumbered in this game. Weapons and armor can be picked up in the world or from fallen enemies. There are trinkets that give bonuses and consumables as well, potions of all kinds, food and herbs which function like temporary buffs, pretty much like in World of Warcraft, I suppose. Armor and weapons come in a variety of rarities as well, so there's common, fine, superior, I believe exquisite and masterwork. And on top of that, they can also be upgraded at a forge, which again I'll touch on a little bit later in the video. Okay, so from spending hours going through dialogue trees and influencing the way the world around you shapes and changing your reputations, you're going to be spending your time in combat. Now, combat is entirely pausable, as with a game like Dragon Age, you can pause the game, issue orders to everyone, or even shift-click to queue orders and then unpause and watch your masterful plan unfold. Of course, complications can occur, and you'll need to pause and readjust your strategies. Enemies have different strengths and weaknesses depending on who you're going to fight, so you're going to need to plan your attacks carefully. I've been playing the game on normal because that was the recommended if you are new to this type of game, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I haven't played a game like this for a long time. But in hindsight, I think that it will be a much better experience to play the game on hard, since on normal I didn't really feel myself being challenged, especially in the latter half of the game. Everything was basically a breeze. I didn't use any potions, I didn't need to use any of the food buffs or any of the other potions in the game. My team was just able to own everybody without using any of those things. My point is that it's not particularly difficult, and I think that if you want a proper experience where you need to tactically consider your situations, I suggest playing the game on hard. There is a combo system in the game as well, where you can team up with companions and pull off special maneuvers. Abilities basically fall under 3 categories. You have your normal abilities, which will just have a little cooldown and you can keep using them. Then you have abilities that can be used once per encounter, so that's 1 per battle. And then the special combo abilities can be used once per rest. Losing too much health in combat is going to lead to wounds, which in turn will reduce your overall health, and as well as the effectiveness of your abilities. Your health bar will go red, indicating that that character has been wounded. But you can just rest and this will, clear all the wounds that your character has. Your party can carry up to 8 camping kits, each allowing you to rest once for 8 hours. So it's entirely possible to rest between battles as well if you need to. There's no time limit in the game, as I mentioned at the start, except when you have to capture Vendrian's well, with a 7-day period if I recall correctly. As I said, the game does have night and day cycles, which is pretty cool, and affects certain skills in the game, which is pretty cool as well. But there's no way to choose how long you want to rest. It's basically rest for 8 hours. There's no way to pass the game to a specific time. You can also slow down or speed up time slightly by pressing plus and minus on the numpad. So speeding up time when you're just running around exploring the map and there's no danger is nice. It'll save you some time. And slowing down the game a notch in combat is nice. It allows you to manage the battle without always having to pause the game. You can zoom in and out as well. But for me, I found that the zoom in range was somewhat limited for my taste. It always felt like I still zoomed too far out. So by opening the console, I could type in a command that players use is Pillars of Eternity, which allows you to edit the zoom range so I could zoom in a little bit more, because sometimes you want to get in close so you can really manage that battle. So I think it would have been nice if that option was included in the options as a default setting. Unfortunately, each time you use the zoom command, each time you exit and go into a new screen, you're going to have to reopen the console and put in the command. You don't have to type it every time, you can just press enter, up arrow and enter. But the fact that you have to do it every time you go through a loading screen is a little bit cumbersome. So I really do wish there was an option in the game to customize your zoom range. There's also magic in the game. Obviously, each caster NPC has their own specific skills, but you can actually create your own as well. There are different cores, which are essentially the different schools of magic. You can then choose an expression, which is how that spell is going to be manifest. Is it ranged? Is it AoE? Is it single target? And once that's assigned, you can assign accents to it, which, for example, could increase its effectiveness. It could increase the range, or how long it takes before you cast it again. This isn't all of them. There are quite a few to choose from. So you can really customize your spells. Obviously, the better the accents or the more accents you put onto a spell, the more expensive it is going to be lore-wise. So if you make it too expensive, only your high lore characters or your casters are going to be able to use it. I kind of like the system. It really allows you to customize your spells for each of the characters if you want to. Of course, when you start the game, you are not going to have access to all of the different accents and the different expressions. These are actual scrolls that you have to pick up in the game. So it's only toward the end of the game where you're going to have such a large variety with regard to your spell customization. And finally, there are the Spies, which are magical towers in the game. There are 5 of them. Once unlocked, these Spies can be upgraded, so you can build a training area or an infirmary or a library and that kind of thing on top of these places. And once you've built these places, they offer benefits. You can hire recruits to work at these places, like trainers or vendors, or people who just intermittently will create different components needed to research and craft items. The problem I found was that, and again I think this boils down to me playing on normal mode, I didn't really use these functions much at all. I didn't feel I need to. The armor that I found I had all picked up, so there was really no reason for me to have to craft anything, or really no reason for me to have to buy anything from the vendors on top of these buildings, because I already picked up all the armor that I needed, and the stuff that I had to buy from them wasn't any better than what I already had. You can upgrade some of your stuff at the Forge upgrade, but again, you'll upgrade a few items and then that'll be it. The rest of the stuff you've probably picked up in the game. And then with regard to the infirmary upgrade, you will get people who create potions. And as I said earlier in the video, I didn't even use any potions in my entire playthrough because I didn't feel the need to use them since the game was not particularly challenging. I think this may all change once you start playing on harder or above difficulty mode. So as you progress through the game, it's what you would expect. You get more powerful, you learn more spells, you unlock more towers, you mold the game world based on your decisions, and wonder what would happen if you had made another choice. It's all very intriguing. Even after finishing the game, I'm wondering what would happen if I made the complete opposite choices on my next playthrough, to be that, really bad guy. And I know what some of you may be thinking, but you said you were a headsman for an evil overlord. Aren't you evil already? Well, the thing is that it's never just black and white. There are some choices that are not so easy, and you can still be good within the confines of your role in the game. And pleasing one faction will usually anger another. Not every choice is going to drastically change the experience or the way the game plays out, but for certain there are several places in the game world where massive changes would have occurred had you taken a different choice. I will say though, since I don't want to talk about any specifics of the story was engaging for the most part, if not somewhat predictable. I did enjoy it, but I found that once you get to a certain point in the game, suddenly the game's over. It seemed to rush to its ending, with the main story at least. It felt like it suddenly came to a conclusion. The voice acting in the game is good. Overall, I thought it was really well done and well acted. The script writing and dialogue trees are interesting and well written. They do a good job of keeping my attention. Unfortunately, not everything is voiced. I think it would be nice if everything was voiced, but with so much dialogue, obviously I understand that that's not entirely possible. But all the main characters and the main parts of the dialogue are voiced. Outside of that, I didn't have any technical issues with the game in my time with it. No crashes or anything like that. I've had a few instances where the game just suddenly went to desktop, but then I just had to alt-tab back into the game. I'm not sure if that was my PC or if it was the game. I don't get it with any other game, so perhaps it was an issue with the game. The other thing was the cutscene sequences. Aside from the main intro, the cutscene sequence after you finish Vendrin's Wall lacked any music or dialogue, so I don't know if that was a bug. And the rest of the cutscene sequences in the game have music but no dialogue, which felt kind of missing. Even when you finish the game and the end dialogue comes up and the end cutscene, which shows you the effects of your different choices, lacked any kind of dialogue. And I would have thought that at least for the ending they would have put some dialogue in to voice those particular lines. It's not a game breaker, but it's just something I thought felt like it was missing. The main gripes that I've had with Tyranny, I guess I voiced some of them about the difficulty, where I felt some of the features in the game were underutilized because the combat was so easy. But again, that's easily rectified by playing on a harder difficulty in the game, I would imagine. The other issues that I want to talk about, and I'm sure some of them are present in Pillars of Eternity as well, were that the AI sometimes gets stuck. For instance, they'll be running and they'll be stuck in the running animation next to an enemy and they won't actually attack. So you have to manually move the guy back, move him back to where he was, and then click on the enemy. And in some cases they just stand there not doing anything at all, even though the party AI was turned on. But it wasn't something that happened often, but it was annoying to suddenly realize, hey, one of my people is not actually doing anything. So hopefully they're going to fix that with future patches and things like that. The other issue was the camera. Sometimes combat's going to take place behind objects, so it makes it very hard to see what's going on and makes it more difficult than it needs to be able to click on your guys and issue orders and things like that. It can be a little bit annoying sometimes. The final thing I think is that the enemies lacked variety. Basically only fight humans for the most part of the game. Then of course there's the Bane, which are these sort of ethereal type enemies. And then of course there's the beast enemies, like the beast woman. And that is the extent of the enemies. The most of the game you're going to be fighting against humans. Yes, there are different classes of human characters, but even across all the different factions, the classes are going to remain, for the most part, quite similar. But none of these things is game breaking. It's a minor annoyance at worst. But overall, I really enjoyed Tyranny. The game was pretty addictive. You get really into the story, and there were some exhilarating moments that I thought were pretty cool. Unfortunately, I do think that the game ended a little bit too soon, but they have left a lot of space for a sequel. The combat itself is enjoyable, it's engaging, it's rewarding, but a little bit easy on normal mode. So guys, definitely play the game on hard mode if you do intend to play. It's going to give you a much better, rewarding experience. I'm certainly going to play through the game again, since there are so many choices, and I'm curious to know what could have been different had I chosen a different option. But otherwise, that's been a look at Tyranny. I hope this gives you guys an idea of what the game is, how it works, without too many notable spoilers. And if you have any questions, you can let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and if you didn't, there's the dislike button as well. And if you do want updates of when I release new videos, don't forget to subscribe. Otherwise guys, I've been Shaolin. Thanks for watching. Until next time.